Hey folks, my name's Matt, and I'm a nerd. I play tons of games. I even make games. I love games of all kinds, and I can't get enough of them. I'm hitting middle age. I've got a family, great job, and I don't exactly have a ton of free time. Still, I'm looking for a new game to sink my teeth into, something the likes of which I've never experienced. I want something light, something like easy to pick up and play in my spare time. My quote unquote starving college kid days, those are long behind me. But I still need to feed my family and not break the bank. I've thought about it a bunch, and I'm pretty sure I found the perfect game that should fit my needs. So yeah, that happened. Um, you know, Despite it not fitting any sane criteria, at the ripe old age of 46, I'm going to dive into Warhammer 40k from scratch. Not only that, but if you stick around, I'm going to take you along for the ride with me. Wargaming with hand painted figures is kind of a white whale for me. I've always really wanted to do it. I should have picked it up in my youth, but it was always intimidating. It still really is, to be honest. I'm not a good artist. I'm not a great strategist. I'm not great with crowds or strangers. Putting that combo together is just kind of scary. Um, for me at least. But I've played a lot of video games in the 40k universe, and I love that universe. I have a lot of friends that have been playing 40k and painting for years. Like the kind of friends who froth at the mouth talking about it, they go nuts over it, and I love them too. Recently, I've watched a ton of videos with some of the nicest, coolest nerds you could ever hope to meet. Some of them playing the game, some of them giving tips on how to play and paint. Some just talking about story, and I feel like by coming out of my shell and jumping into this, I'll be joining good company. In reality, I'm actually picking up three hobbies. I'm going to learn to paint minis, which I've never done, but it looks absolutely exciting and fun. It should be a craft that takes years to even get decent at. I'm going to learn to play 40k, which I understand 10th is coming, but there's so many just terms and concepts that I have to learn. Understanding that piling in is a thing, stuff like that. I've got some work to do there, and then third, I'm going to learn to take footage, do some voiceover, and cut some videos so that you guys can come along with me. I am going to make a ton of mistakes, but I'm not going to act dumb and make mistakes on purpose. I'm not into that sort of shtick. I'm genuinely going to try my best. When I screw something up, it'll be real and preferably manageable, I guess. To end at their pinnacle, hopefully those mistakes will be really good teaching moments, not only for myself but for anyone watching. Someday I want to look back on all this and be proud of the work that went into it, and hopefully the progress I've made. And I sort of feel as this army gets built and the figures start looking better, and as editing skills and camera work get better, hopefully it all kind of comes together to a point where it's passable, and that'd be pretty rad. Publicly documenting this journey will be pretty terrifying, but good for me. I'm a very private person. I don't put myself out there that much. Um, but I think, by posting all of this stuff, someone out there other than me might be inspired to do something that's outside of their comfort zone. And in the end, that's a pretty noble goal, I think. Well, I think I've rambled on enough about me for now. So let's drop in a silly, hastily made title screen thing and get this underway. This is 0 to 40k. All right. Well, I got a desk. I got a light. I got some space to work on. I got a core rule book, and I've got a. Yep. I should probably explain that I'm gonna make a Death Guard army. As you likely know, Reddit has a lot of people that like to talk about a lot of things. And when it comes to stuff like Warhammer, you get some like really, really deep, deep thoughts on it. Some extremely enthusiastic people, and a lot that sound, at least to my novice eyes, because I'm reading it, like they know what they're talking about. Now, overwhelmingly, strangely enough, across a wide number of threads, they sort of touch on the same couple initial thoughts for someone like me who's totally new to playing the game in terms of like where to get started, which I thought was amazingly valuable. So here's how my thought process went. Most folks just straight up tell you like pick something that you think is cool because you're going to be doing a lot of building and a ton of painting. And I think they understand, from experience that, initially like, oh, I'm going to go do this huge thing, and I want to make sure that like my first army doesn't suck. But I think these old wizards also recognize that this is going to be a journey. So like, pick something that you're going to be really happy to sit down at a desk with, with tiny little brushes, with your eyes getting blurry, with your hands kind of shaking from all the coffee, because you're going to be in there and you're going to be doing a lot of fundamental work just to get the army on a table. The second pearl of wisdom that I read a lot about was folks saying like, don't go crazy with the rules if you're just getting started. Think about how you want to play, how you want to lead an army in terms of like style and general feel, and then see if you can find a faction that matches up with that, which I found to be amazingly like great advice, because the rules are daunting. I go on like Wahapedia and I'm reading a bunch of stuff, and it all just is like cross-referenced mumbo jumbo that I'm very hopeful that someday will make sense. But every single time I tried to like drill in too deep, I just found myself getting blindsided with option paralysis. So I kept going back and going like, oh, what am I doing? And then just kind of taking the advice from some of these folks. I decided to just like really zero in, look at a bunch of pictures, read a little bit of history, and go from there. So the Death Guard are bad guys, like down to the core. They have like a very rich history of how they got there, but there's no mistaking when you look at Death Guard units that they are definitely bad guys, and that to me is pretty cool. I like the fact that hopefully at some point I'm standing across the table from someone who's playing the good guys, and it visually looks like a locked-in battle of really good versus really evil. I think that's a pretty awesome theme to carry, and I like being the bad guy in most of the games that I play. So I think here they fit nicely. Death Guard are slow, and that I'm pretty sure is going to work well for me because I'm very impulsive, and I'll probably get myself into some amount of trouble if I play some high tempo factions. So the fact that they're slow, I think hopefully motivate me to be more contemplative in how I play, because I can't hopefully make them do too much, too stupid, too fast. So slow's a good thing for me here. The Death Guard are also tough. Once again, a sort of, I don't know, self-healing against my own ineptitude. Just from what I've read, I'm hoping that the Death Guard's toughness will somewhat protect me from myself, give me a little bit more leeway to make not the most optimal tactical choices, and to also sort of thematically play into like a sort of plotting forward inevitability kind of army where I'm going to try to set the field so that it's at my advantage, but I'm not going to be zipping around doing like crazy gambits and getting myself in trouble that way. Undeniably, Death Guard are pretty darn metal. Like, so much of the imagery involved, there's scythes going around, there's noxious gas, there's a bunch of just rusty, beat up stuff. You put a bunch of Death Guard units on a black T-shirt, and you're ready to go to a show. I think that aesthetic is so awesome, and being able to paint a bunch of minis like that, I think is just like as a long-term plan, that's just going to be a heck of a lot of fun the whole way through. Practically speaking, every model is different in its own special way, and um, I think it makes it a great choice for me. And finally, from like a technical building and painting perspective, I think the fact that they're all the Death Guard are kind of like their own weird asymmetrical, twisted, mutaty thing, and all creepy, is going to pose a lot of interesting challenges. They're not just organic, they're not just metal. A lot of their shape language is like twisted and off in some way. And so I think every single model that I go through is going to kind of provide a different perspective, maybe some different skills. And I'm not going to be, I mean, obviously I'll be repeating a lot of things, but each and every one of them is kind of bespoke in their own way. Some of them have like masks with tubes on. Some of them have like weird tooth face man thing. Some of them have a tentacle instead of an arm. I think I'm going to learn a lot by going through and building this massive army of these weird misfit Marines. Okay then, let's get back to that store visit. I got a bag of booty, which cost me dearly, but I'm pleased with what I picked up. So obviously you can see the core book and the Death Guard Codex. Those are the first things, but then I had to get some cool things. Practice models. 3 versions of some dude with a spear that I don't know about, but the guy at the store was cool enough to just give me some models to just get rolling with, which is cool. I haven't read through this, but it's a bunch of little activities you can do and get free stuff for. It's a great way to sort of onboard. And on to the good stuff. The first box that I picked up was a squad of Plague Marines, kind of a backbone unit. Each one of these models looks really rad and is very unique, and I think they've got some variants. All of their weapons look like a hodgepodge of very brutal and ominous toys of destruction. If I was being conservative, I probably would have just only picked this one up, but I'm kind of jumping in with both feet. So I also picked up a few other things. First and foremost here, though, is this box. Here we go. So this box has an additional unit of 7 Plague Marines. So now I've got 2 units of that, or I could, I guess, mash them all together, but 7's a good lucky number. I'll probably keep them that size, even if it's not optimal. Also in the box is 20 Poxwalkers, which are this motley, I think they don't look like they're wearing much armor. Some of them have cool coats and like uniforms. I think these are just raised Pox undead things. This should be a bunch of fun and a bunch of practice, sort of like rock through all of these guys. But then additionally, there is a Biologus Putrefier. I have no idea what this dude does. He's got like a cool tank and some sort of spray gun. Amazing. Sounds super cool. That should be fun to paint. And then someone who sounds pretty important because his name's Typhus. You'll find in Warhammer that there's a lot of aptly named characters. And given some of the lore, you think about the names Mortarion and Typhus, you might have been able to predict how they might end up after a fall from grace. But Typhus is rad looking. He's got a crazy scythe. He's got a horn coming out of his head. I can't wait to get to this character. I think what'll be awesome, though, is the road getting there. And at the point when I have all these models built, I think I'll be in pretty good shape. It's time for paint. This right here is the basic paint set that they sell for beginners. It's got one brush. It's actually got the little snippy duty things for pulling the model pieces out of the sprues. And very importantly, it has yellow and blue and red and black and white. And with those, fundamentally, not perfectly, you can, on your own, mix paints and come up with not every color, but a wide variety of them. I'm not very good at that, but it's something I'd like to be better at. I think think there's a lot of learnings there. I think eventually you're picking things that are pretty close to the color that you want, but you want to modulate um, by a little bit in a certain direction, maybe highlights or shadows. You start with a sort of core color and add black or white, or in some cases, red or blue or yellow. So this is great. For me as a beginner, I think this should, give me a lot of options. Ah, yes. Another brush, because why not? I think one of them's a little bit bigger than the other. Some glue to glue together our models. Why just buy a paint set when you can buy a few more? I think one of these was very Death Guard appropriate, and I'm a bit of a spendthrift, which I'm finding these stores are rough with. I think that was another brush. Ah, yes. The Emperor did not protect my wallet, at least on this trip. But I knew that going into it, and I could definitely have saved some money here and there, but I wanted to go into this experience as a new player, going into the store and buying off the shelf the necessities sort of packaged the way Games Workshop thinks makes sense for me as a customer. I could have bought vastly fewer paints. I could have stuck with just a single squad of Space Marines. I could have even stuck with just the paint set. It's got the brush and the clips, and just taken the practice models and given that a shot with some glue. But I felt like coming out with a decent amount of merchandise that felt like I was really getting into this and doing it from the perspective of them trying to sell to someone new. It was a good experiment. I am excited. I'm all set. Except that a couple of the things that I set aside when I was at the store I forgot. Namely, a couple cans of primer, which I think some of you more experienced folks will be looking at that empty bag and going, nice job. The first step after putting the model together, you forgot it. Well, I did that, and I took that as a good sign of being not even an acolyte, a straight up noob. So back to the store I went. The salesman guy at the Warhammer store was absolutely awesome, and I have to say that part of the experience was fantastic. He was very knowledgeable, didn't push me in any sort of direction. When I came back the next day, he still had my two cans of primer set aside, and he's like, "Oh, I'm glad you came back because you got all this stuff, and then you left these here." So that I thought, and he remembered my name, which was rad. So all in all, as much as I sort of dropped the ball there, I came back. He was like, "Hey, here, have some White Dwarf." I still haven't cracked that open. I don't even really know what it is. I did get a razor because I'm prone to cutting myself. I figured one with a thick handle would be good. More pain to the wallet. That's fine. I got another brush, a nice big one, so I can make some sloppy mistakes. Yeah, look at that. It has the name on it. Must be a good color. So between, Death Guard green and then Chaos black, in terms of primer, I should be pretty good. I'm not planning on doing too many bright color things. Yeah, sure, why not? A couple more paints. I think one of them's like a blood sort of finish. That seemed like it was apropos. And yeah, and I got this really neat coin because the salesman had them. He's like, "Yeah, why don't you take one of these too?" So I have to say, the customer service experience was pretty sweet. The wallet part, not so much, but it is what it is. So I'm probably not going to show the putting together of every single model that I ever do, but this one was interesting. It was a snap together version, so no glue. It's great for beginners. I am a beginner. I think all the other models I'm going to pick up are going to be glued together, which is cool. But as a start, I thought this was a really smart way to go. And the fact that I got this thing for free, and I think there are actually 3 copies of the exact same guy, so I might try some variants of them. It's just a great starting point. It's really cool to look at the model pieces. The one on the right there is the guy's head sticking out of his leg. I don't know. I just found that kind of funny. I think at some point that'll be the most non-funny, meaningless thing. But without instructions, I think the other part that was impressive was this was a relatively straightforward, easy to build model. It definitely does not look like a plague marine. All the parts were in the right places, but I did think about that while I was putting this together, and it felt good. It's for something so tiny, and yeah, when I was real little, I built like model planes and model ships, and I never really painted them. I'd put decals on them, but something this tiny, there's something very interesting about putting it together, and because it's anatomical, it's kind of like a little bit of a surprise to it. Look, I'm still suffering through like how did these legs go together? But it was fun. It was a hoot putting this model together. Alrighty, it was getting late, but I wanted to push through. I didn't tape the priming of this dude because I ran outside. It was like I don't know, it was like 1 or 2 in the morning. It was dark out. Don't have a good camera set up. It was raining. I just wanted to power through and get some paint onto the model. He's not real. He's a snap together freebie, so I just got moving. I just decided to get underway. I used a lot of gold paint for all the armor and hardware. I don't really have any idea who this character is, but there's sort of a like Colossus of Rhodes vibe going on. And I decided to go with that. And I used the Death Guard green as a base because I kind of wanted to see how like metallic looking stuff worked with a base that I was going to use a lot of that wasn't black or white, and get that. Maybe it would have a bit more of a like old, not rusted, but weathered look. And I don't know, I had a spray can in my hand and it was late and I gave it a shot. I had a lot of fun immediately getting started with this. You find yourself getting into a weird sort of zone. For first time, there were some frustrations. You immediately start looking at spots like behind the shield and up near the arm, and you're like, oh, how am I even going to get in there? Obviously, I don't want this to turn into some joke video where there's just absolute globs of paint all over it. So I was trying to be careful and mindful and not use a crazy amount of different colors. So, gold for the hardware. I was going to use some brown for the spear shaft, and then working a little brown for the belt. I think I used some off red, which you'll see later. There's a little bit of a sash behind it, but your eyes go into this like transition when you get started, where you start just seeing a lot more detail in the model than you, as a novice, you think about. I decided I was going to mix some paints to get a brown for the belt and the spear shaft. Brown should, in theory, be pretty easy. If you remember from when you're a little kid, you start mixing paints around, and no matter what, you sort of always end on brown. But getting a good one, that might be a challenge. Wasn't too worried about it, this being a practice model, but it worked out kind of just fine. You're working with such small amounts of paint that I think it's conducive to feeling okay with experimenting. This stuff's expensive, but it's really just a few drops on a piece of cardboard, which I found cardboard is a terrible thing to mix paints on. This kind of paint just goes right into the cardboard super fast. You can see that the gold paint there, that's already like dried and soaked into it, but that's a lesson learned. I'll put my paints on something else next time. But as you can see here, I basically am just grabbing a little bit of yellow, grabbing a little bit of blue, grabbing a little bit of red. Blue's one of those weird things you don't think goes in brown, but it does. And it was fun. Doing a little bit of color chemistry for science. I'm starting to apply that wonderful brown that I just made to any of the spots that seem to me like they're wood or leather. And at this point, I really started to realize that like I went fast in terms of like I put the model together, went outside, primed it, let it dry, came back in, and I didn't, because it's not a model that I bought, and I knew that it was an experiment, a trial run. I didn't really look at it with that much detail until about this point. And I quickly realized that, like, wow, there's a lot going on this model that I didn't think about. I was just kind of painting as I went, but I was having a blast. I think that as a first model, just a few things you learn along the way just by doing are just really cool. I felt really creative. I'm not going to talk about like my aim. I was going to use the word technique, but that's a little bit lofty. My aim with a brush was a struggle. My eyes were not focusing well. I'm not particularly coordinated to begin with. But as you do it, it makes you feel like more of an artist. I think right around now is when I started to get that feeling of like, I think I see why people do this. Like, I know it's going to be a long way before I'm good at it, but there's something very meditative about it. And I can absolutely imagine having, a Saturday afternoon free. I have to imagine that because I really don't have free Saturday afternoons. But, and just having a bunch of models lined up and being ready to go through them all and like put a base coat down and just get rolling. What is stronger than steel? Flesh. So I probably should have shown a shot of me mixing this paint, but by this point I was just wily tired and hyped up. I was like, yeah, I'm an artist now. I'm gonna mix flesh color. It turned out okay. I couldn't tell if the hands were armored or not. The face of this model looks very like pronounced to the point where maybe it's a mask. But I figured it would be a good challenge to put some decent skin tone together, so I did that. And as my fatigue was catching up with me a lot, I was like, yeah, let's just do this. So here I just basically paint the hands and the face, and I think those are the only spots that were showing. And it was neat. But I started feeling like I was coming to a close on my ability to add anything coherent to this paint job this evening. This is the point in the night where whatever latent caffeine and adrenaline I have coursing through me are just, they're tapped. But like the model's not even in the shot. It's amazing. I love it. Um, every once in a while I put it down on that little A4 that I kind of go like, hey, maybe that's where I'd put an X to mark this thing. But essentially, if you can see, I'm kind of just dry brushing it. And yes, I've only put down base color on the thing. Um, but by this hour, whenever it was, I was pretty sure I was done for the night, and I just kind of wanted to see how that would look, and then just tuck in and call it. And that's basically what I did. I put the model down, shut the light off. I didn't even wash my hands, and I went to bed. But I went to bed very happy. I didn't. I won't say that I felt accomplished, but I was super psyched. And as primitive and rushed an endeavor as it was, I barely primed it, missed whole chunks of it. I just kind of mostly painted the thing gold with a little bit of wood, a little bit of red for part of the sash, and some leather and woodwork, and then just dry brushed over that. I had a genuinely good time doing it. It felt really good, watching it sort of come together from starting in that sort of old school army man, because obviously I used a very green primer, and to like sort of come to life a little bit. Very fulfilling. It, like hits above its weight class. And so, in the morning, obviously, I learned how to focus my camera a bit better, but I was pleased with it, and I think I might actually be done with this guy as my first model, even though there's whole gaps of steps that I didn't take. I'm proud of him. I should probably give him a name, but yeah, I think as a first painted model, he's pretty rad, and I'm going to be psyched to put him on a shelf. And at the end of the day, for something new that I hadn't done before, yeah, I think I'm in. Like, I think I'm in. So that just about wraps everything up. Thanks for sticking around for about a half hour or so of shenanigans. I've come up with a to-do list going forward. So some of this is homework for myself before I start recording any other adventures. Some of it is things to do as next steps. So first and foremost, I need to learn how to use this camera. Obviously, there's a lot of terrible shots and missed shots and blur and all kinds of stuff. So that's top of the list. Beyond that, I need to get better with recording and editing audio. I do a lot of dumb talking, so I would at least like it to be clear and cut well. I'm going to think about trying to find a way where I can actually voice over while I'm working. I think that'll just be a little bit better, which would be fun for me and sort of give it a sort of Bob Ross feel to it. So that might be fun. I think I want to make and paint the model that I made this time around in this episode again, because I have 2 more copies of it, and I think that'll be kind of cool to see a first and second try of exactly the same model with different techniques. It's lofty. With different sloppy painting. I think the next one I'll actually put a different color primer on it. I'll try black, just to see how that changes, do some different stuff as I paint, and see how that goes, and then be able to put them next to each other and compare. Finally, it's time to start thinking at least high level about what goes into a 2,000 point army of death card. That is, what you see is what you get, no proxying, none of that stuff. That'll be a challenge to sort of get into a light level of understanding the game without having ever played it. Understanding some elements of strategy and army construction. I'll probably point folks at the places I went to for information to sort of get my head around things. So that will be interesting. I've already got some Plague Marines, some Poxwalkers, Typhus, some other guy. So those are definitely in, but I will need to buy significantly more models to happily paint to fill out 2,000 points. So we'll talk about that a bit next time too. Thanks again for hanging out, and We'll see you soon. Bye bye.